The alien king feared his daughter was gone forever, until she. The sun hung low over the floating cities of the Thalorian Empire, painting the crystal towers in shades of gold and violet. From his throne, King Varkos, a tall figure with 4 powerful arms and glowing emerald eyes, surveyed the palace gardens. Despite the beauty of his world, a heavy weight pressed on his chest. His daughter, Princess Lyra, had vanished. No one had seen her in the last 12 hours, and every trace she left seemed to vanish into the thin, violet mist that hung over the city. Lyra had always been curious, always restless. From the moment she could walk, she had wandered through the palace halls, touching everything, exploring every corner. She had an unquenchable thirst for knowledge, a spark that made her different from the other royal children of the galaxy. But this spark now worried her father more than ever. The king had ordered a search of the palace, every room, every hidden passage, and every level of the floating gardens. Scouting drones hovered above the towers, their sensors scanning for heat signatures. But all they reported were empty corridors, untouched rooms, and the faint hum of the palace's power cores. Nothing. Varkos paced back and forth. He had ruled the Thalorian Empire for more than 50 cycles, had negotiated peace treaties, prevented wars, and maintained the loyalty of dozens of star systems. Yet now he felt helpless. His daughter had disappeared without a trace. The palace commander approached cautiously, lowering his head. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice tense. "We have checked every sector. The private quarters show no sign of forced entry. Lyra's personal starcraft is missing, but all exits from the palace are secure." It is as if she vanished into the air itself. Varkos stopped pacing and turned toward him, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Vanished. Are you telling me my daughter just disappeared?" His voice trembled with anger and fear, though he tried to hide it behind the authority that had kept entire systems in line. The commander shook his head. "I do not know, Your Majesty. But we will extend the search to the outer cities and the surrounding starways. Scouts and tracking units are ready." The king's mind raced. Lyra had always been clever, but she was also young. She would not wander off alone without telling anyone. And yet the evidence, or lack of it, pointed in that direction. He could feel the whispers forming in the corridors even before they reached him. Whispers of weakness, of failure. His enemies would use this against him if she were gone. Varkos left the throne room and walked through the palace halls, where servants and advisors were quietly murmuring among themselves. The air felt heavy with tension, and every face seemed to avoid meeting his eyes. He had always been respected, feared even, but now there was a hint of doubt. He stopped at the balcony overlooking the gardens. Below, glowing trees bent slightly under the gentle wind, their leaves reflecting light like tiny stars. In the distance, he could see the city extending into the horizon, the floating platforms connected by streams of light. Every one of those platforms was alive with the Empire's energy, yet none of it mattered if his daughter was lost. A soft sound caught his attention. He turned and saw the palace's AI attendant floating near him, its spherical form pulsating with light. "Your Majesty," it said in a calm, almost soothing tone, "I have intercepted a signal. It appears to originate from an uncharted sector beyond the violet expanse. It is encrypted, but it carries a pattern that resembles Princess Lyra's signature energy frequency." Varkos's heart leapt, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Show me," he demanded. The AI projected a holographic map into the air, showing stars, planets, and nebulae. A faint line pulsed at the edge of the map, moving slowly through a region no one had explored. "It is weak," the AI explained, "but it is consistent with Lyra's personal energy imprint. She could be alive there." Varkos clenched his fists. The thought of his daughter trapped so far from home filled him with both hope and dread. He immediately summoned his council, a group of wise and trusted advisors, known for their knowledge of the stars and the Empire's secrets. "My daughter may be alive," he told them, his voice steady but urgent. "This signal suggests she is in the uncharted sector. Prepare a fleet. We leave at once. And be warned, no one under any circumstances is to question my decision. Lyra is coming home." The council members bowed, their faces showing a mixture of relief and concern. They knew the dangers of uncharted space, rogue planets, wild energy storms, even creatures that defied logic. But none of that mattered to Varkos. Nothing mattered except finding his daughter. Meanwhile, far away on a barren, desert-like planet, Lyra struggled to make sense of her situation. She had landed her small, personal craft in a canyon when a sudden turbulence had forced her down. The engines had failed on impact, leaving her stranded. She looked around at the rocky, golden landscape, her green eyes scanning every shadow. Lyra was scared, but she refused to panic. She remembered the lessons her father had taught her: observe first, act second. She carefully examined the surroundings, noting the strange patterns in the rocks and the way the winds shifted the sand. She realized that the canyon could offer some protection from any creatures that might inhabit the planet. Her hands worked quickly, checking the tools in her pack. Though young, Lyra had a mind sharp enough to solve complex problems and a courage that had surprised even the most experienced members of her father's court. She began repairing her craft, using spare parts and her knowledge of alien technology. As she worked, Lyra noticed movement at the edge of the canyon. Small, unfamiliar creatures, curious and cautious, observed her from a distance. She froze, remembering the stories of predators that could sense fear. Slowly, she held out a device that emitted a soft hum, hoping it would communicate peaceful intentions. The creatures paused, studying her, and then retreated. Lyra exhaled a sigh of relief. Back on the palace, Varkos was monitoring the preparations for the rescue fleet. Ships of all sizes glimmered in the hangar bays, each equipped with advanced scanners and engines designed for long-distance travel. He personally oversaw the integration of AI units designed to trace Lyra's unique energy signature. Nothing could be left to chance. Despite his determination, the king could not hide his worry. He remembered the last time he had seen Lyra, her bright laughter echoing in the halls as she darted through the gardens, chasing after small, glowing insects. He remembered the moment she had presented him with a small crystal she had found, proudly explaining its origin. The thought of her alone, vulnerable, brought a tight knot of fear to his chest. Varkos shook himself, trying to focus. He could not dwell on what might have happened. All that mattered now was action. He activated his personal starship, a sleek vessel designed for speed and agility, and prepared to lead the fleet himself. He would not wait for anyone else to take the first step. His daughter's life depended on it. Far away, as night fell on the desert planet, Lyra built a small shelter from the canyon rocks, careful to shield herself from the harsh winds. She watched the stars, recognizing constellations she had studied in her lessons. For a moment she allowed herself to think of home, of her father, of the palace, of the floating gardens. Then she shook her head. She had no time for longing. She had to survive, and she had to find a way to signal her father. She remembered the small communication device her father had given her, a gift for emergencies. Its range was limited, but perhaps with ingenuity she could amplify the signal. Using pieces from her damaged craft, she rigged a small transmitter, combining the old technology with her understanding of energy patterns. Hours passed as she adjusted, recalibrated, and tested. Finally, she sent out a faint pulse, encoded with her personal energy signature. She watched as the signal disappeared into the night, hoping beyond hope that anyone would receive it. Back in the throne room, the AI's sensors picked up a faint response. Varkos leaned forward, his eyes widening. "It's her," he whispered. "She is alive." The council erupted in controlled excitement, but Varkos silenced them with a raised hand. "Prepare the ships. We leave immediately. Every moment counts. My daughter is alive, and I will bring her home." As the fleet departed from the floating city, streaking through the violet skies and into space, Varkos stared ahead, a mix of fear and determination in his gaze. He knew the journey would not be easy. The uncharted sector held unknown dangers, and his daughter was out there, alone, facing a world far different from the comfort of the palace. But he also knew this: Lyra was no ordinary child. She was clever, brave, and resilient. She had inherited his strength and perhaps something more, the spark that could change everything. And somewhere on a lonely desert planet, Lyra waited. She did not know if her father would come for her or if she would have to find her way back alone. But she did not doubt for a second that she would survive. The stars stretched endlessly above, a tapestry of possibilities. And the adventure of reunion, courage, and discovery was only just beginning. Lyra had spent the first night on the desert planet hiding in the shadow of the canyon walls, listening to the soft hum of the wind as it moved across the rocks. Her makeshift transmitter had sent a faint pulse into space, but she did not know if anyone had received it. Her heart ached with worry for her father, and at the same time a sense of determination rose inside her. She could not give up, not now. Not when the galaxy was so vast and the possibilities so endless. The desert planet was unlike anything she had seen. Golden sands stretched for miles, dotted with jagged rock formations and strange crystalline growths that reflected the sun in dazzling patterns. Some of the crystals emitted a soft, pulsing glow, which seemed to respond to her presence. Lyra found them fascinating, and for a moment she forgot her fear as she walked among them, studying their patterns. But her attention quickly returned to survival. She had food rations and water for a short while, but she needed to find shelter and a more sustainable way to sustain herself. She began exploring the canyon more thoroughly, using the skills her father had taught her. She climbed rocks, tested the strength of the crystals, and used the shadows to move unseen. She even built a small container to collect condensation from the cool nights, using it to store water. During her exploration, she noticed signs of other life. Tiny creatures scurried across the sand, their bodies glinting in the sunlight. They were harmless, curious perhaps, but they reminded her that she was not completely alone. She realized that she needed to be careful. Not everything on this planet was friendly, and she would need to learn quickly if she wanted to survive. A few days passed, and Lyra began to feel more confident in her new environment. She had repaired some minor parts of her starcraft, though it was still not fully functional. She had also improved her transmitter, amplifying the signal slightly in hopes that it might reach her father again. But as she adjusted the device, she noticed faint signs of movement in the distance. Shadows shifting across the sand, patterns she did not recognize. Curious but cautious, she approached quietly. The shadows belonged to creatures larger than any she had seen before. They did not seem hostile at first. They moved with careful precision, as if aware of each other, communicating in ways she could not yet understand. Lyra watched from behind a crystal formation, her green eyes wide with fascination. Hours passed as she observed them, and she realized they were intelligent. Not humans, not like her father or the people in the Empire, but clearly capable of communication and organization. It struck her that this planet, though harsh and isolated, had life that was far more complex than she had imagined. Lyra spent the next few days carefully studying these beings. She made notes in a small holographic notebook she carried with her, sketching patterns, recording sounds, and testing interactions. She did not try to make contact directly yet. She wanted to understand them first. She remembered her father's lessons: knowledge is power and caution is wisdom. One morning, she found a small group of creatures observing her from a distance. She remained still, holding her breath. Slowly, one of them approached, tilting its head as if curious about her. Lyra held out a hand, showing that she meant no harm. The creature paused, sniffed the air, and then returned to its group. It seemed satisfied with her presence. This interaction gave her an idea. If she could communicate, even in small ways, with these beings, they might help her. She began leaving small gifts, shiny crystals, pieces of metal from her craft, and patterns drawn in the sand. Over time, the creatures began to approach more confidently, bringing small tokens in return. Lyra realized she had gained their trust. It was during this period of cautious friendship that she discovered the rebels. Hidden in the far side of the canyon was a small settlement, built into the cliffs and partially camouflaged by the golden sands. The buildings were simple but functional, and the inhabitants moved with purpose and coordination. They noticed Lyra immediately, but instead of hostility, they seemed curious. Lyra stepped into their camp cautiously, hands raised in greeting. The rebels were cautious too, their eyes sharp and observant. One of them, a tall figure with blue skin and glowing silver eyes, stepped forward. "Who are you?" the figure asked in a voice that was firm but not threatening. "I am Lyra," she said, choosing to give her first name only. I need help. I am far from home and I do not know this planet. I only want to survive." The leader studied her carefully, his expression unreadable. "Survival is possible here, but it is not easy. You are not from this planet. How did you come?" Lyra explained carefully, leaving out any mention of her royal identity. She told them about her starcraft, the turbulence, and the crash landing. The rebels listened quietly, nodding occasionally. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, as if they were weighing whether to trust her. Finally, the leader spoke. "You may stay, but know this: our planet is not safe. There are dangers you do not understand, and you will need to learn quickly." "We help those who help themselves." Lyra agreed eagerly. Over the next few days, she learned their ways. She discovered how they sourced food from strange desert plants, how they captured water from deep underground reservoirs, and how they navigated the canyon safely. She was a quick learner, and her natural curiosity made her an asset to the group. Despite the hardships, Lyra's spirits lifted. For the first time since the crash, she felt a sense of belonging. She was not royalty here, not the princess she had been in her father's palace. She was just Lyra, a young girl learning to survive and thrive in a strange new world. One evening, as the twin suns set behind the canyon walls, Lyra discovered something remarkable. Hidden beneath one of the rebel buildings was a small archive, ancient and almost forgotten. The walls were lined with glowing panels, and the air hummed with quiet energy. She stepped inside, her eyes widening in wonder. The archive contained knowledge beyond anything she had seen, even in the palace libraries. There were maps of the stars, diagrams of energy flows, and writings about interdimensional travel. Lyra realized that this planet had once been a hub of advanced civilization, long before her father's empire had reached these systems. Her mind raced with possibilities. If she could understand and use this knowledge, she could repair her starcraft more effectively, perhaps even improve it. She could find a way to signal her father more clearly, ensuring he knew she was alive. And perhaps she could gain a deeper understanding of the galaxy itself. As she explored the archive, the rebels returned, their curiosity piqued by her absence. She quickly explained her discovery, showing them some of the harmless maps and diagrams. They were amazed but wary. They had never seen someone so young, so capable, and so fearless. "You are clever," the leader said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "Few outsiders could understand these things. Perhaps you are meant to do more than survive here." Lyra smiled faintly. She did not reveal her full plan yet, but the thought of using her knowledge to return home and to help her father filled her with hope. She began studying the archive in secret, learning what she could about energy patterns, navigation, and communication technology. Each discovery made her more confident, more capable. Meanwhile, in the distant reaches of space, King Varkos's fleet moved steadily toward the uncharted sector. Every sensor, every scanner, every AI unit was focused on finding a trace of Lyra. The king himself watched the readings obsessively, refusing to sleep, refusing to rest. He could feel the distance between them, stretching across light years, but he did not falter. Back on the desert planet, Lyra finished another day of study and exploration. She returned to her small shelter, carefully storing the precious data she had collected. She thought of her father, imagining him leading the fleet, his determination unwavering. She wanted to reach him, to show him that she was alive and capable. But for now, she had to be patient. She had to learn to grow to survive. As night fell and the twin moons rose, Lyra gazed at the stars. Somewhere out there, her father was searching, moving through the vast darkness of space. She sent a silent thought toward him, hoping he could feel her presence. "I am here," she whispered. "I will find my way back, and I will be ready." In that quiet moment, Lyra realized something important. She was no longer just a child lost in the galaxy. She was a survivor, a learner, and a strategist. She had made friends, earned trust, and discovered knowledge that could change the course of her life. And most importantly, she had hope, the unyielding hope that she would see her father again. The desert winds continued to blow, carrying whispers of possibilities across the canyon. Lyra knew that challenges awaited, that dangers might appear, and that the journey home would not be easy. But she also knew that she was no longer helpless. She was clever, resourceful, and brave. She would face whatever came next with determination, and nothing, not even the vastness of space, would stop her from finding her father. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the stars and the void, King Varkos and his fleet pressed forward, unaware of the trials and discoveries his daughter was experiencing. But soon, very soon, their paths would converge, and the galaxy would witness the reunion of a king and his extraordinary daughter. Days passed on the desert planet, and Lyra had settled into a rhythm. Each morning she rose before the twin suns fully peaked above the jagged horizon. She would check the small water reserves she had collected, inspect her repaired starcraft, and then make her way to the hidden archive beneath the cliffs. The archive had become her sanctuary. Ancient panels glowed faintly, illuminating the walls with soft, shifting light. Lyra moved among them with reverence. The knowledge stored here was far beyond what she had ever imagined. Maps of distant galaxies, energy diagrams, starship blueprints, and writings on interdimensional travel filled the shelves. Each discovery made her feel both small and powerful at the same time. She was learning quickly. By studying the patterns in the ancient star maps, she realized that the uncharted sector where her father's fleet might be searching could be accessed in a new way. There were routes, hidden paths through gravitational currents that could cut days or even weeks off travel time. If she could harness this knowledge, she might be able to find her father, or at least signal him more clearly. Her mornings were spent in study, her afternoons exploring the surrounding canyon and desert, and her evenings sharing meals with the rebels. Though they had initially been cautious, the rebels had grown fond of Lyra. They admired her cleverness, her curiosity, and her willingness to help. She had even taught some of them how to analyze the patterns of the desert winds to predict weather changes, a small but useful skill that earned her their respect. One evening, the leader of the rebels, the tall figure with blue skin and silver eyes, approached her while she examined a star chart projected from the archive. "Lyra," he said, his voice calm, "you are different from anyone we have known. You think in ways that we cannot. But there is more here than you understand." Lyra looked up, her eyes shining with curiosity. "I know, that is why I am studying. There is so much I want to learn, and I need to understand this knowledge if I am going to survive and get home." The leader nodded. "Survival is one thing, understanding is another, and what you are learning can change more than just your life. But there are secrets here that even we do not touch. You must be careful." Lyra considered his words carefully. She understood caution. There was power in knowledge, and power could be dangerous if misunderstood. But her mind buzzed with possibilities. If she could learn, if she could master even a fraction of what this archive held, she could not only survive but also become stronger, cleverer, and ready for the challenges ahead. That night, Lyra lay under the twin moons outside her shelter. She thought about her father. Somewhere far away, he was leading the fleet, searching tirelessly for her. The thought filled her with warmth and determination. She knew he would not give up on her, and she would not give up on him. She would find a way to reach him. The next day, she returned to the archive with renewed purpose. She examined a series of panels that appeared to relate to communication technology. They were complex, filled with diagrams and equations she did not fully understand yet. But she could see patterns, energy flows, and possibilities. By combining what she knew from her father's technology with these ancient designs, she began to devise a way to amplify her signal across much greater distances. Her work was slow and careful. She tested small components, observed reactions, and refined her calculations. Hours passed unnoticed as she focused entirely on the task. And when she finally activated a small prototype transmitter, a faint beam pulsed into the sky. It was far from perfect, but it was stronger than anything she had used before. She hoped, though she could not be certain, that her father might receive it. While she worked, she also kept an eye on the rebels. She had grown fond of them, and they had become her friends. She noticed their routines, their interactions, and their careful, almost ritualized movements. They were more than simple survivors. They were a community, bound together by trust and mutual reliance. Lyra felt a sense of belonging here, even as she longed for home. One afternoon, she overheard a conversation among the rebels that gave her pause. They spoke of the history of the planet, of the civilizations that had risen and fallen, and of the factions that had once controlled the desert. There was mention of conflicts, not violent but political and strategic, and the leaders who had been cautious with the knowledge stored in the archives. Lyra realized then that she had stumbled into more than a survival situation. She had entered a world of secrets where knowledge itself was power. The rebels were cautious not because they were untrusting, but because they understood the stakes. Some knowledge, if used unwisely, could disrupt the balance of their world, or attract attention from beyond the planet. Her mind raced with possibilities. She could use this knowledge to signal her father more effectively, perhaps even guide him through safer routes. She could learn from the archives to improve her starcraft, making it faster and more efficient. And she could understand the forces that shaped this planet, preparing herself for any challenges she might face in the future. That night, she tested the amplified transmitter. The beam stretched across the sky, pulsing steadily into space. She watched it with hope, imagining her father somewhere out there receiving the signal. Somewhere, she imagined, he would feel a connection, a bond that no distance could break. Meanwhile, the rebels observed her quietly. They recognized her determination, her ingenuity, and her courage. She was no longer just a visitor. She was a part of their world, a bridge between the ancient knowledge of the planet and the possibilities that lay beyond the stars. Over the next few days, Lyra continued to refine her understanding of the archive. She experimented with the energy flows, observed the reactions of the crystals, and even began to map out patterns that could be used for navigation. Her mind was a whirlwind of ideas, each more daring than the last. She realized that if she combined the old technology with her own innovations, she could accomplish things that neither the ancient civilization nor her father's empire had dreamed possible. One afternoon, while exploring a distant part of the canyon, she discovered something unexpected: a hidden chamber carved into the rock, faintly illuminated by crystals embedded in the walls. Inside, she found devices and objects that seemed far older than anything else she had seen. Some resembled StarCraft components, others were tools of calculation and measurement, and some were objects she could not even identify. Her curiosity was piqued. She spent hours examining the chamber, carefully taking notes and testing the functionality of the devices. She realized that this was a secret repository, perhaps left behind by the original inhabitants of the planet. The knowledge here was untouched, waiting for someone clever enough to understand it. As she worked, she became aware of a presence. One of the rebels had followed her, observing her quietly. He stepped forward slowly. "You are daring," he said, his voice low but not unkind. "Few would explore this chamber. Many would fear what they do not understand." Lyra smiled faintly. "I am not afraid. I want to understand. Knowledge is the only way to survive here and perhaps to find my way home." The rebel nodded. "Then you are unlike any we have known. We can help you, but you must also respect the history of this place. Some knowledge is dangerous if misused." Lyra agreed, though in her heart she already knew she would use this knowledge carefully. She felt a growing sense of confidence. She was no longer just a child lost on a desert planet. She was a learner, a strategist, and an inventor. And with each passing day, she grew closer to achieving her goal, returning home to her father. Back in space, King Varkos's fleet was moving steadily through the uncharted sector. The sensors had picked up faint signals, likely Lyra's transmissions, but they were weak and difficult to interpret. Still, the king's determination did not waver. He knew his daughter was alive, and he trusted in her cleverness and resilience. As Lyra continued her studies, she made a breakthrough. She discovered a method to focus and amplify energy in a way that could make her signal travel across even the most distant regions of space. She tested the concept, adjusting frequencies and energy flows. When the device finally pulsed with steady strength, she held her breath, hoping against hope that her father would detect it. Far away aboard his flagship, Varkos's sensors picked up a faint but unmistakable signature. His heart leapt. "It's her," he whispered. "She is alive and she is sending for me." Lyra had done more than survive. She had learned, adapted, and innovated. She had proven that even in a strange and challenging world, cleverness, patience, and determination could open doors to solutions that no one else might find. As she looked up at the twin moons, Lyra felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer just waiting for rescue. She was preparing for it, shaping the future with her own hands, and proving that even a young girl in a distant desert could influence the course of events across galaxies. The night air was cool against her skin, and the desert seemed to stretch endlessly. But Lyra felt no fear. She was ready for the challenges ahead, and somewhere in the vast reaches of space, her father was coming closer. Their reunion was not far off. She could feel it in the pulse of the stars, in the hum of the crystals, and in the steady beat of her own heart. The galaxy was vast and mysterious, but Lyra had learned that cleverness, courage, and hope were as powerful as any starship, any weapon, or any empire. And with those qualities, she was ready to face whatever awaited her next. The desert planet's twin suns rose slowly over the canyon, casting long shadows across the golden sands. Lyra was already awake, her green eyes scanning the horizon as the soft light illuminated the crystalline structures scattered across the land. Each day, she felt more confident in her knowledge of the planet and its secrets. She had learned to predict the winds, understand the creatures, and navigate the labyrinthine canyons with precision. But today, she had a new purpose. The prototype transmitter she had constructed and refined over the past days pulsed steadily in the shelter she had built. Lyra had learned to harness the ancient energy patterns she discovered in the archive to amplify its signal. She had run countless simulations, adjusted the energy flows, and now she believed she could reach beyond the desert planet, perhaps even into the uncharted sector where her father's fleet searched for her. She began the day by carefully inspecting the transmitter. Its components were delicate, a mixture of her craft's technology and the ancient devices she had uncovered. Each piece had to be aligned perfectly. A small miscalculation could weaken the signal or disrupt its pattern. Lyra worked with meticulous focus, her hands steady, her mind clear. As she finished the final adjustments, the rebels gathered quietly around the shelter. They had come to respect her intelligence and determination, recognizing that she was not only surviving but thriving. Some whispered to each other about her ingenuity, while others simply watched in awe as she manipulated energy patterns with confidence and skill. The leader of the rebels stepped forward. "Lyra," he said, his voice calm, "you are ready. What you are about to do is not simple. This signal, if successful, could travel farther than any we have ever achieved. But it is also delicate. One mistake and it could fail entirely." Lyra nodded. "I understand, but I have to try. My father is out there. He will not give up on me, and I cannot give up on him. I have to send this signal." The leader gave her a small, approving nod. "Then do what you must. We will support you, but the success of this depends on your focus and cleverness." Lyra activated the transmitter. A soft hum filled the shelter as energy flowed through the carefully aligned circuits. Light shimmered along the crystalline walls, reflecting in patterns that seemed almost alive. She adjusted the frequency, aligning it with the specific energy signature that matched her father's personal sensors. This was the part that mattered most, the connection. Outside, the rebels watched silently. They could not fully understand the technology, but they recognized the care and intelligence in every action Lyra took. Slowly, a faint beam of energy stretched from the shelter into the sky, pulsing steadily, a silent call across the void of space. Thousands of kilometers away, King Varkos's flagship detected the faint signal. His emerald eyes widened as he focused on the reading. "It's her," he whispered, his voice trembling with relief and determination. "She is alive, and she is signaling for me." The sensors analyzed the signal, and though it was faint, it contained unmistakable patterns, the unique energy imprint of his daughter. The king's heart soared. He immediately ordered the fleet to adjust course, moving faster toward the source. Every ship followed his commands with precision, their engines humming as they sliced through the void. Back on the desert planet, Lyra monitored the transmitter closely. She adjusted the energy flows, ensuring that the signal remained strong and steady. Hours passed, and as night fell, the twin moons rose above the canyon, casting their pale light across the sands. The signal continued to pulse, unwavering, as if guided by her determination and hope. During the quiet of the night, Lyra reflected on the days she had spent on this planet. She had learned so much about survival, about intelligence, and about herself. She realized that she had changed. She was no longer the frightened girl who had crashed here. She was clever, resourceful, and confident. And now she had the opportunity to guide her father, to show him not just that she was alive, but that she had grown in ways that could benefit the entire empire. The rebels, sensing her determination, gave her space to work. They had come to understand that she was not just a guest or a survivor. She was a leader in her own right, capable of shaping outcomes through thought and strategy rather than force. They respected her decisions and allowed her to operate freely, providing only the occasional assistance when she asked. As the first hours of the second day of signaling passed, Lyra began to notice subtle changes in the desert itself. Crystals she had observed for days seemed to pulse more strongly, responding to the energy flows she had initiated. She realized that the planet's natural energy was amplifying her signal, something she had not anticipated but welcomed. Her cleverness and patience had allowed her to unlock a hidden potential, a partnership with the environment itself. Meanwhile, the fleet of Varkos moved closer to the desert planet, scanning every asteroid field, nebula, and gravitational current in their path. The king's mind was focused entirely on Lyra. He knew the dangers of the uncharted sector, but he trusted in her intelligence and resourcefulness. He had raised her to be clever, to think strategically, and now those lessons were the key to finding her. Back on the planet, Lyra noticed a new pattern emerging in the signal. She quickly realized that the pulses were beginning to resonate with the natural energy currents of the canyon. With careful adjustments, she amplified the resonance, creating a pathway of energy that stretched across the void, like a luminous bridge connecting her to her father. The rebels watched in amazement. They had never seen anything like this. The young girl was not merely signaling, she was shaping energy itself, using her understanding of the planet and her own intellect to reach across the stars. The leader stepped forward, awe in his silver eyes. "Lyra, you have done something extraordinary. This is beyond anything we imagined." Lyra smiled faintly, her focus never wavering. "I just need him to see it. I need him to know I am here." Hours later, the first ships of the fleet emerged from a dense field of cosmic clouds. The sensors detected the amplified energy signal, and the king's heart leapt. "Prepare to lock onto the signal," he ordered. "This is our path. Follow it, and we will find her." The fleet moved with precision, guided by Lyra's clever use of energy resonance. She watched the instruments carefully, making subtle adjustments to ensure that the pathway remained stable. It was a delicate balance, a combination of her father's technology and the ancient knowledge she had uncovered. As the fleet approached, the leader of the rebels approached Lyra. "They are close," he said quietly. "You will see him soon." Lyra's heart raced. The thought of seeing her father, of being reunited after so many days of isolation and uncertainty, filled her with both excitement and nervousness. But she reminded herself to stay focused. She had prepared for this moment, and her cleverness would ensure that it went smoothly. Finally, a small shuttle detached from the lead ship of the fleet and began its descent toward the canyon. Lyra watched as it glided through the thin atmosphere, guided by the signal she had created. She could see her father inside, his forearms steady, his eyes focused but filled with emotion. The shuttle landed smoothly near her shelter, and the ramp extended. Lyra took a deep breath, her legs moving almost automatically as she ran forward. Her father stepped down first, his eyes locking onto hers. For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. "Lyra," Varkos whispered, his voice thick with emotion, You are alive." "I am," Lyra replied, her voice steady but warm. "And I am ready." The king moved quickly, gathering his daughter into a careful embrace. For a moment, neither spoke. The desert winds whispered around them, and the twin moons cast a serene light over the reunion. The fleet waited above, sensors scanning, engines humming softly, as the king and his daughter shared the long-awaited moment. Lyra pulled back slightly, looking up at him. "Father, I have learned a lot here. I have discovered knowledge that could help your empire, and I can guide you through the sector safely." Varkos's eyes widened with both pride and astonishment. "You, clever, brave Lyra, you have grown stronger than I imagined." She smiled faintly. "I had to survive. I had to be clever, and now we can return together." The rebels watched from a distance, nodding to each other in silent respect. The young girl had proven herself not through force or power, but through intelligence, strategy, and courage. She had not only survived, but had prepared the way for her father's fleet to arrive safely. As the fleet lifted off to depart the desert planet, guided by Lyra's understanding of energy patterns and navigation, she stood beside her father, looking out at the endless horizon. The stars stretched above, a vast canvas of possibilities. She had learned much, grown much, and discovered more than she had ever imagined. And now, together with her father, they would navigate the galaxy once more, stronger and wiser than ever. The journey back would not be without challenges, but Lyra knew this: cleverness, courage, and hope could overcome even the greatest obstacles. She had proven it to herself, to the rebels, and now to her father. The galaxy awaited them, full of mysteries and opportunities, and she was ready to face it all. And somewhere deep in the uncharted sector, the twin lights of the desert planet faded from view, leaving behind only the whispers of a clever girl who had turned survival into triumph and fear into hope. The fleet glided through the uncharted sector, guided by Lyra's clever calculations and the resonance signal she had created on the desert planet. King Varkos stood on the bridge of the flagship, his eyes fixed on the star-strewn void ahead. Beside him, Lyra studied the navigation panels, her hands moving confidently over the controls. She had learned much during her time on the desert planet: the ancient knowledge, the rebels, survival techniques, and the delicate art of observation and strategy. Now she applied all of it to guide her father's fleet safely through the unknown. "Keep the energy flows stable," she instructed, pointing to the glowing lines on the display. There's a gravitational current ahead, and if we don't adjust, the smaller ships could drift off course. The fleet responded instantly, the ships shifting in perfect harmony. Varkos watched his daughter with awe. In all his years as ruler, he had trained commanders, generals, and pilots, but none had demonstrated the combination of intelligence, ingenuity, and calm focus that Lyra now displayed. She was no longer just his daughter, she was a partner, a strategist, and a beacon of hope. As they moved forward, Lyra's attention was drawn to a cluster of dark asteroids. They were dense and irregular, their gravitational pulls overlapping. The ancient knowledge she had discovered on the desert planet allowed her to calculate precise paths through the cluster, creating a safe passage for the fleet. "Prepare to follow my lead," she said, her voice steady. "Trust the patterns I've laid out and everything will be fine." Varkos nodded, a proud smile on his face. "I trust you completely, Lyra." The fleet moved as one, weaving carefully between the massive asteroids. Small shimmers of energy from the ships reflected against the rocky surfaces, creating a stunning visual of light and shadow. The rebels who had once aided Lyra watched from a distance as the signal they had helped create now guided the king's ships through danger. It was a quiet triumph, the kind that required intelligence rather than force. When they cleared the asteroid cluster, a vast expanse of luminous nebulae stretched ahead, its colors swirling in waves of violet, gold, and deep blue. It was breathtaking, but also full of hidden currents and unpredictable energy pockets. Lyra studied the readings, her mind mapping every fluctuation, every twist in the currents. "This sector is unstable," she said softly, almost to herself. "We must maintain energy resonance or risk drifting off course." Varkos placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have prepared us well. I have no doubt we will navigate this safely under your guidance." The fleet moved carefully through the nebula, Lyra's calculations precise, her adjustments minute but crucial. Hours passed, yet the mood on the flagship was calm. The officers and crew marveled at the young girl's cleverness, her ability to apply the ancient knowledge she had learned in ways that even the most experienced commanders had not anticipated. As the nebula cleared, a breathtaking sight unfolded. In the distance lay a cluster of habitable planets, lush with greenery, rivers, and mountains. But more importantly, there were signs of civilization, floating platforms, energy grids, and cities that reflected sunlight in dazzling arrays. Lyra's eyes widened. She realized that this sector was far from uninhabited. It held mysteries and knowledge waiting to be explored. "This is incredible," she whispered. "There is so much here, so much to learn." Varkos smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "And you will be the one to guide us through it. Lyra, your cleverness has brought us here safely. You have not only survived, you have elevated our entire fleet, our empire." Lyra felt a surge of satisfaction. She had endured isolation, learned new skills, navigated unknown dangers, and now was proving herself as a true leader. But she also knew that her journey was far from over. There were new discoveries to make, new challenges to face, and new ways to use the knowledge she had gained. The fleet approached the nearest habitable planet, its atmosphere glowing with life. Sensors detected cities and infrastructure, energy flows unlike anything Varkos had seen before. He realized that this sector held ancient civilizations whose technology could be integrated with the Empire's own. And the person capable of understanding and guiding this integration was Lyra. She studied the readings carefully, analyzing the energy signatures and patterns. "These civilizations are advanced, but they have hidden pathways, networks of knowledge that must be approached carefully," she said. "We can learn from them without disruption, and perhaps even share insights that benefit both sides." Varkos nodded. "You are wise beyond your years. I am honored to have you guiding this journey." As they descended toward the planet, Lyra noticed subtle disturbances in the energy patterns. They were not dangerous, but they required careful navigation. Using her knowledge of the ancient energy flows, she calculated a path that would allow the fleet to land safely while minimizing interference with the local civilizations. The ships followed her guidance flawlessly, a testament to the precision and intelligence behind her instructions. When the fleet finally landed on the planet's surface, the citizens observed from a distance, curious but not threatened. They had likely seen travelers before, but none had approached with such precision and understanding. Lyra stepped forward with her father, their presence calm and respectful. "This is a new chapter," she said softly, almost to herself. "We can learn from them and they can learn from us." The leader of the rebels, who had once guided her on the desert planet, appeared alongside her. "You have done well, Lyra," he said, "not just for yourself, but for everyone involved. Your cleverness and determination have created a bridge across the stars." Lyra nodded, feeling a sense of fulfillment she had never known. She had faced isolation, learned from an alien world, and now stood ready to guide her father and the fleet into new territories. She realized that survival was only the beginning. Cleverness and courage could shape the future itself. Varkos looked at his daughter, his heart swelling with pride. "You have proven that intelligence, resourcefulness, and hope can overcome any obstacle. You are not just my daughter, you are a leader in your own right." Lyra smiled, feeling the weight of those words. She understood now that true power did not come from force or authority. It came from cleverness, understanding, and the ability to guide others with wisdom and care. The fleet began integrating with the planet's local networks, exchanging knowledge in a careful, respectful manner. Lyra coordinated the efforts, using both her father's fleet technology and the ancient knowledge she had uncovered. The process was meticulous, requiring patience and insight, but it demonstrated the power of clever thinking over brute force. As days passed, Lyra and Varkos oversaw the collaboration between the fleet and the local civilizations. They shared ideas about energy manipulation, navigation, and resource management. The citizens marveled at the young girl who had guided a fleet through uncharted space and now facilitated understanding between worlds. Lyra found joy not only in learning, but also in teaching. She shared her knowledge with the rebels who had helped her, with the fleet, and with the civilizations on the planet. She discovered that cleverness was contagious. By showing others how to think creatively and solve problems, she multiplied the impact of her efforts. One evening, as the twin moons of the desert planet rose high, Lyra stood with her father on a high platform overlooking the landing zones. She reflected on the journey, the crash on the desert planet, the lessons from the rebels, the discoveries in the archives, and the careful navigation of uncharted space. Every step had required patience, intelligence, and courage. Varkos placed a hand on her shoulder. "Lyra, you have done more than survive. You have changed the course of our journey, our empire, and perhaps even the galaxy. I am proud beyond words." Lyra smiled, feeling a sense of completeness. "I could not have done it without your teachings, father. And without the lessons I learned on the desert planet. Cleverness and courage go hand in hand, and I will continue to use them to guide us forward." In the days that followed, the fleet prepared to depart, carrying the combined knowledge of the empire and the civilizations they had encountered. Lyra worked alongside her father, mapping energy flows, adjusting navigation routes, and ensuring that every decision was guided by intelligence and foresight. As the ships lifted off, the desert planet and its twin moons fading into the distance, Lyra realized that her journey had transformed her. She had gone from a frightened, stranded child to a clever, resourceful leader capable of guiding fleets through the unknown. She had proven that human ingenuity, intelligence, creativity, and perseverance could stand alongside even the most advanced alien civilizations. Varkos watched his daughter with pride. The galaxy was vast and full of mysteries, but he knew that with Lyra by his side, they could face anything. Together, they had demonstrated the strength of cleverness over fear, understanding over force, and hope over despair. Lyra looked out at the stars, her mind alive with possibilities. The universe was vast, and there were more worlds to explore, more knowledge to uncover, and more challenges to overcome. But she was ready. With her father, the fleet, and her own cleverness, she could shape the future, not through power or dominance, but through wisdom, insight, and courage. And as the fleet moved steadily through the stars, Lyra felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had survived, she had learned, and she had guided her father safely to new worlds. She had proven that even a single clever mind could make a difference, even in the vastness of the galaxy. The twin suns of the desert planet were now far behind them, but the lessons she had learned there, patience, observation, creativity, and courage, would guide her always. Lyra had become more than a survivor. She was a pioneer, a clever strategist, and a symbol of hope for her empire. The galaxy stretched before them, infinite and full of possibilities. And for the first time, Lyra understood that her journey was not just about returning home. It was about using her cleverness to explore, to understand, and to inspire. She had turned survival into triumph, fear into hope, and isolation into opportunity. With her father beside her and the fleet following, Lyra guided them toward the next horizon, confident that no matter what awaited them, their cleverness and courage would light the way.